So in this video, we're going to be going over the basics of percents, definitions, properties, and all that stuff. So first off, percents in general are just basically values that are out of 100. So they're kind of like ratios with the denominator of 100. So having 20% of a pizza means you have 20 pieces of pizza out of every 100 pieces. So if you were to cut a pizza into 100 equal pieces, you would get 20 of them. That's what it means to have 20%. Now, normally we wouldn't have, 100 different pieces of pizza, but that's just kind of a way to gauge how much pizza you would have of the total amount. Is that if you were to cut 100 pieces, you would get 20 of them. So you can kind of think about how big a slice that would be in general. And percents themselves have three different ways of being represented. They can be represented as the percent form, which is just kind of this right here, that's the percent form, or as a fraction, or as a decimal. So the percent form, again, is just 20% as a percent form would be 20%. That's the percent form. It uses the percent symbol. That's just the basic way of writing it. Now, this is usually how we write our final answers if they're asking for a percent, but it's not usually how we operate with them. We don't normally operate with percents in percent form, although we do occasionally. We mainly operate them with decimal or sometimes fraction form. So how do you write the fraction form for percent? Well, you just simply take the number 20 and put it over 100. Because again, percents are just in general out of 100, always out of 100. And then you can reduce it from here. So you think, okay, well, I can cross off the zeros and make it 2 out of 10. Then I can divide the top and bottom both by 2 and make it 1 out of 5. And that would be the fraction form reduced of 20%. So again, the fraction form just always starts out as something over 100, and then you can reduce it from there. To get the decimal form, what you do is you take the number, 20 again, then you jump the decimal left twice. So remember, if you don't see a decimal, you assume it's always at the very right end, and you jump it left twice, and that new value, which in this case is 0.2, that is the decimal form of 20%. Now, the reason we jump it left twice is because if you think about it as a fraction again, as a fraction, this is 20 out of 100. What's another way of saying this? Well, it's like 20 divided by 100. What do you do when you divide something by 100? Well, you just simply jump the decimal left twice, which is where we get this direction and this amount from. So because percents are always out of 100, we jump the decimal left twice, and that's how we get the decimal form. And again, if you don't see a decimal, you assume it's always at the right end, and if you're jumping over an empty space, you just fill it with a 0. So how about 42? What would be 42 as a fraction? Well, that'd be 42 out of 100. And then once again, most of the time you can reduce it, definitely if it's an even number because you can divide by 2. So if we reduce this, we divide the top and bottom by 2, we get 21 out of 50. That's the reduced fraction form of 42%. What about the decimal form? Well, we're going to take 42, we're going to jump the decimal left twice, and we get 0.42. That's the decimal form. And you can kind of start to see the pattern here. Most of the time you'll be able to do this really quick because you can kind of see what's going to happen. What about 5%? Well, fraction's still the same thing. Starts with 5 out of 100. We can divide both these by 5. So if we divide 5 by 5, we get 1. If we divide 100 by 5, we get 20. So 1/20th would be the fraction form. What about the decimal form? Well, we start with 5, take our decimal, and jump it left twice. So 1, 2. Now this empty space right here, we fill in with a 0. So we have 0.05. Not 0.5. A lot of people think 5%, well, it's just 0.5. That's actually 50%. 5% as a decimal is 0.05 because you jump over that empty space there. 2.3. Well, as a fraction, it's a little trickier. So we do 2.3 out of 100. But normally we don't want a decimal in a fraction. That's just kind of bad form. It's kind of unreduced. So how can you reduce this fraction? Well, what you do if you have a decimal where you don't want it, you take the decimal and you're going to jump it to the right until it falls off. So in this case, I have to jump it once to the right. It'll fall off the number, and I just have a 23. Now, whatever I do on the top, I have to mimic on bottom to keep the fraction the same. Just like here, I divided by 5 on top and bottom. Here, I divided by 2 on top and bottom. Here, I jump the decimal point right once, So down here, I jump the decimal point right once, and again, I'm going over an empty loop. So this is 1000, 1000, because this empty loop gets filled in with a 0. So the fraction form would be this, 23 out of 1000. So if you have a decimal in your fraction, jump the decimal until it falls off from the top, and then mimic that jump on the bottom. What about the decimal form? Well, we have 2.3. We're going to jump it left twice this time, so 1, 2. So I have 0.023 as my decimal form. Again, empty jump means put a 0 in there. 0.04, we'll start with 0.04 out of 100. We're going to jump this once, twice, so it takes 2 jumps this time to jump off, which gets me 4. Do the same thing on bottom, twice, 1, 2. I get this, there we go, 10,000. So now I'm going to think, can I reduce this? Well, I know I can divide by 2, but I think I can divide by 4 as well. So if I divide the top by 4, I get 1. If I divide the bottom by 4, I get 2,500. So that's the reduced fraction form. Decimal form would be 0.04. Jump it left twice. So we have 2 empty jumps this time. So we have 2 zeros, 1, 2, and then 0, 4. So that would be the decimal form. Again, when you're jumping from percent to decimal, you always jump left and you always jump twice. No more, no less. Now, a common thing with percents is finding the percent of a number. So let's say you have, I don't know, 50 candies or 40 candies in this case, and you say 15% of them are blue. How many blue candies are there? Or if you have, again, a stack of, I don't know, pizza boxes and you have 20 pizza boxes and you want 30% of them, how many pizza boxes should you get? Well, the way we figure out what the percent of a value is we change the percent into its decimal form and then multiply it to the total value that we're looking at. So in this case, we have 40 candies, that's my total value, and we want 15% of them to be blue, or 15% of them are blue. Well, first we're going to change 15% into a decimal, so 1, 2, so that's 0.15. Then we're going to multiply it to the total value, so 0.15 times 40. So all it is just a multiplication problem, really, and we get 6. So 6 candies would be blue, that's 15% of 40. So change to a decimal and then multiply to the total. What about in a dog park? 20 are dogs, or sorry, there's 20 dogs and 40% of them are large dogs. How many large dogs would there be? Well, change 40 into a decimal, so jump it left twice. We get 0.4. So we're going to take 0.4 times 20. So if we have 0.4 times 20, it's kind of like 4 times 20, then move the decimal, and you get 8. So there are 8 large dogs in the park. Which you can kind of think of, well, that should be true because 40% is pretty close to half, and half of 20 would be 10. So it should be less than 10, but pretty close to it, and that's what 8 is. 8 is less than half, but pretty close to it, which makes sense to be 40%. What about a test? You have 60 points on a math test, and this guy earned 90%. How many points did he get? Well, again, 90% as a decimal, jump it left twice, is 0.9. We're going to take 0.9 times 60. And then this will get how many points he earned. So we know the percent is 90%. We want to say, okay, how many questions or points did you actually get correct on this test? In that case, it's 54 points. So we got a 54 out of 60, which is basically right here at 90%. So if you want to find the percent of something, which is a very typical problem, again, all it takes is change the percent to a decimal and then multiply to the value that you're looking at. That wraps up this video. Hope you enjoyed the video. Have a good day.